Okay, welcome everybody once again to Booth Library. My name is Stacy Knight Davis, and I am one of the co-ringleaders of the Harry Potter 20th anniversary series here at Booth Library. Steve Brantley is my partner in crime on this, and Beth Hildebrandt, wherever she got off to, is also instrumental in the program. Today we are here for Angie Hunt from Hope of East Central Illinois to talk about Muggles, magic, and abuse. And we really thank Angie for coming. We're so glad that she could marry two of her passions in life, and we've got a certificate.
Oh, it's a Harry Potter certificate. This is the greatest day of my life. So it's true. When I originally got the email from Steve that said, "Hey, someone suggested that you might be able to do a presentation combining Harry Potter and the themes of abuse in it." I'm one of those odd people that was like, yes, I'm gonna go talk about abuse. I do that a lot. I talk about abuse all the time because it is my passion in life to end abuse, but all things Harry Potter are one of my home passions that I get to have a lot of fun with. So this really is an incredible thing. The information that I'm talking about today is from all 7 books, from Fantastic Beasts. And I'm embarrassed to say that I have not read The Cursed Child. Has anybody read that in here? Yes? Okay. That's one I have not read yet. So one of the things that I definitely want to say, I am not a stand up and lecture at you kind of person for an hour. So I'm a big fan of bribery. And each time you ask a question, make a comment, contribute to the conversation, I'll give you candy, right? That deserves applause. It's the other reason I bring candy. Yes?
Is there a limit to the amount of candy you can get?
Absolutely not. You can get as much as you want. The more you take, the less I have to carry, so please do it. So I'm assuming that everybody in here is pretty much at least a halfway Harry Potter fan, right? I know some of us have recently been to Harry Potter Land, even in Florida, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And I do, by the way, this is a brand new presentation for me. I've never done this before, so I actually had to create an outline and take notes. I'm actually a little nervous. Luckily, I think I know almost everybody in this room, so I'm speaking to a good crowd. Harry Potter changed our world, right? Does anybody else feel like that? That this series really changed our world. I do a lot of education in the schools, 7th through 12th grade, and I saw everyone reading these books. Everyone, 7th graders, 8th graders, seniors in high school, boys, girls, everyone suddenly was reading, and that was such a powerful thing. And so I happened to pick up the book one day thinking, all the kids are reading this, I'm gonna read this too. And it was everything. Where was this book when I was 8? I would have been incredibly happy if it was. So in looking at it, though, we see all of these beautiful, magical things that happen in life. And I don't know about you, but I was one of those kids that kept waiting for a Hogwarts letter before I knew what a Hogwarts letter is. Anybody else still waiting? I'm 38. I'm losing hope. I'm 48. I'm not 38. I can't even remember how old I am anymore. So then there's that darker side. What I want to do a little bit of interactive stuff. But first of all, there are themes in here that we can't ignore. We're going to talk about abuse today, but there's also racism. There's a lot of racism used as kind of a metaphor for what's going on in our society right now. There's a lot of prejudice. I've even heard the argument that ableism is one of the themes to be kind of explored in the Harry Potter books. Does anybody know why? Remus Lupin, because he's a werewolf, and so people in society are very against him. He faces a lot of discrimination about that. So I think one of the great things that J.K. Rowling did was help us start really having these conversations in such a great way, and teaching a whole new set of kids. Yes?
I was actually thinking a little bit about Neville Longbottom when you said that. Because he's sort of this clumsy, awkward kid.
Yes.
And, it's pointed out a lot.
Yeah.
He's kind of the butt of a lot of jokes.
Yeah, definitely. And we're actually going to talk about Neville here in a little bit, because there's some interesting things, too, that I thought of, and maybe you can add to that, too, in particular for Neville Longbottom. So, yeah. So let's talk about it. Give me some examples. I got this candy. What are some of the things you saw in Harry Potter that you thought were signs of abuse? Things that would concern you?
Uncle Vernon and the Dursleys basically locking Harry up inside a room closet.
Yes, yes. He slept in a cupboard for all of his life. He slept in a cupboard, 11 years. What do we put in the cupboard, by the way? In our homes, what do we put in the cupboard?
Things we don't see.
Things you don't want to see. Things you don't want anybody else to see. Things that don't go for the company, right? It's not the fine china that you're putting there. Yeah, things that you don't want to see. What else? Yes?
Nearly every interaction with the house elf that isn't free.
Yes, yes, themes of slavery. Oh my gosh, yeah. We could do an entirely different presentation on the themes of slavery in there. Yeah, that's really something. What else? Look, I got Tootsie Pops.
Lucius Malfoy and his relationship with his wife and,
Thank you.
and Draco.
With his wife and what?
With his wife and Draco.
Yes, thank you. We're going to talk a lot about that too. So what about with Harry? Harry in particular, let's talk about him. What are some of the other things that were abusive to Harry? 'Cause there's a whole lot. Yes?
He never got a birthday present.
He never got a birthday present.
We just read that the other night.
He-
I'm reading it for the second time with my little girl.
And doesn't it just break your heart to think about that? He never had a birthday present, never had Christmas presents. And then suddenly he goes to Hogwarts and for the first time in his life, he gets presents too. Can you imagine that moment for him, for a child who has lived that long of his life? Not only not getting those presents, but watching as someone else gets the lion's share of it.
Having the knowledge of who he was kept from him.
Thank you, yes. His entire culture was kept from him. Knowledge of his family, his history, everything about his life was kept from him. Yeah, I think that's a really important one too. What else? There's a lot.
He had his brother, Dudley, was just really horrific to him as well.
Yes, they had the, if I remember right, because it has been a few years since I read the books, but they had Harry hunting, right? At school, didn't they? Didn't they call it Harry hunting? When Dursley and his friends would, or Dudley and his friends would chase Harry in school, they would beat him up, they would do all kinds of things like that. Definitely bullying, yeah. Yes?
Was there Hermione had prejudice against her because of, what, was she a Muggle?
Muggle-born, yeah, she was Muggle-born. She wasn't a Muggle, but she was born to Muggles, yeah.
There was the word they used for him.
Mudblood.
Mudblood.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, definitely a lot of there. What about eating? That was one of the things that really struck me. There's actually, I believe it was in the first book, there's a part, and I can't remember the exact words, but there's a part where Harry's talking or thinking to himself about how he's laying in the dark in his cupboard. He doesn't have a watch, and he wishes he had a watch because he's waiting to make sure that the Dursleys are asleep so that he can go in the kitchen and get some food. And it says the Dursleys didn't exactly starve him, but there was never enough for him to eat. He was very skinny. He was very tiny. This was a child that was malnourished, right?
Mm-hmm.
That always just touched me, to think that this child is sitting in a cupboard, just waiting for people to go to sleep so that he can go and get food. That's heartbreaking, right? What else? There's a whole lot. Yeah.
He constantly had lies told to him and about him by the Dursleys.
Yes.
To other people, they would lie about him.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you know, I didn't even write that one down, yeah, but constantly telling other people terrible things about him. Yeah, what was the aunt's name?
Petunia.
No, the other aunt, not Petunia.
Marge.
And
Huh?
Marge.
Yeah, Marge.
Marge, yes, Marge, thank you, yes. Oh my gosh, yeah,
No,
Marge.
I always remember that one. That
Yeah.
scene. That scene. The scene in the movie, I always remember that when she's. Yeah, and then he acts out in anger as well.
Yeah.
And she.
Let's remember that, okay?
Yeah.
Let's remember that part, because I want to talk about that. Ragged hand-me-down, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say educational neglect because they sent him to the worst school they could and then tried very, very hard to prevent him from going to Hogwarts.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, educational neglect, that's a big one. Why do you think they did that, by the way?
Why they tried to keep him from going to Hogwarts?
Yeah.
I think just because they were afraid people would find out. I mean, they just hated everything about
Yeah.
wizarding. Like,
I think there's also sometimes when someone has spent that much time abusing a child, they certainly don't want them to have allies
right.
who may come and get in that. Danielle, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say because knowledge is power.
Yeah,
And
thank
then
you.
want that.
Because knowledge is power. Yes, knowledge is power. That is, I think, the most important phrase ever uttered in the human race. Knowledge is power, because it absolutely is. Also, that love is great. You know, that's good too. What else? There was a line that always struck me that I always remember, and I can't even remember what the part was, but Harry was thinking, the Dursleys didn't believe him. No one ever did. No one ever did. No one ever believed him that he was the victim of all this. No one ever believed him. This is a child who's so tired, he's not even going to try. Nobody ever believes me. Why should I even try to do that? It's just heartbreaking. He's treated like a servant. Let's see if we got everything. There was one part in, I think it was the Chamber of Secrets, where Aunt Petunia aimed a heavy blow at his head with a soapy frying pan. He ducked, so she didn't actually hit him. So we're not just talking about emotional abuse and neglect. There's physical abuse going on in this household. You know, this is going on there. No communication with friends. They put bars on his windows, right?
Mm-hmm.
They put bars on his windows. Didn't want him mixing with their nephew. They actually say that in one point. They don't want him mixing with their nephew. And then this is a lovely typo I'm going to point out for the camera and everybody's benefit. I don't know what LMPWS is, but I'm sure that whatever I was trying to say was very important to this presentation today. So the Dursleys were always torn between wanting to be rid of him, wanting to be rid of Harry, and wanting to keep him around in order to make him as miserable as possible. That's what Harry felt like. He felt like they were torn between that. They can't decide which is better, get rid of me or make me as miserable as they possibly can. That is really something. So what does this do to Harry? What are some of, do we see effects in any of the books? There are, if you look really closely.
What was the question?
What are the effects of all of this abuse? Because all these things that we mentioned, they're abuse. What are the effects? What are we seeing in Harry?
Well, I just have a question. Does it seem to cause him to mistrust others?
Thank you. Causes mistrust. If you pay attention to some of the dialogue, and there's one specific part where, I think it's in Chamber of Secrets, Hermione is telling him, Harry, don't worry about this. Dumbledore's got it. He's not going to let anything bad in here. Everything's going to be okay. Ron tells him, no, Dumbledore will never let that happen. People are telling him these kinds of things quite often, but Harry really can't trust that. He can't trust that, A, if he goes to Dumbledore and tells him about his suspicions about Snape, he does not believe that Dumbledore will believe him. He doesn't trust that the adults there are going to take care of it and keep the kids safe. He has a distrust of adults. Whereas you look at Hermione and Ron, they've grown up in these households where they were valued as children. They were included. They were treated well. And they have this trust of the adults around them.
He doesn't trust himself either at
Yes.
all.
Yes.
When he accidentally speaks partial tongue in Chamber of Secrets,
Yes.
people start to think, and he believes that he might be the heir of Slytherin and how
Yep.
horrible that could be, because he's never had a chance to, he's never had anybody support him.
Yeah. He's never had anybody tell him he's good, that he's decent, that he doesn't have to worry about. And you're exactly right. Yeah, he doesn't trust himself. And there are a lot of times throughout the books where he does something, wrong, and he immediately thinks, oh my gosh, I'm going to be like Voldemort. I'm going to be like this evil person. Yeah, he has no faith in himself. He has no trust in himself. He has no idea why Hogwarts would want him. I think it's a big mistake, right? What else? What are some other signs we see? Yes?
He's surprised anytime he's treated well.
Huh.
He's surprised anytime he's treated well.
Yeah.
Because he's been told for so long that he doesn't deserve it. When he's invited to the Weasleys, when he's invited to Hogwarts, all of those things take him by surprise.
Yeah. And can you imagine how that was for him going to the Weasleys? To see this other side of life where people like you and they're great to you, and again, they value you, and I can't imagine how that must have been.
He never had the feeling of a mother figure, Miss Weasley became
Yeah.
that mother figure.
Yes, she very quickly did. She saw that. She kind of has this ability to see what Harry needs and be there for him and be that for him. Yeah, she's my favorite. I thought about being her today. She's probably the one I resemble most closely. Harry also has a great sense of empathy, doesn't he? This child who grew up with absolutely no empathy shown him grows up with unbelievable capacity for empathy. I think that is a really beautiful thing. What about PTSD? Do we see anything that might be PTSD? We do. In Order of the Phoenix, he starts having these outbursts of anger. He starts having, and he starts thinking again, I'm going to be like Voldemort. I'm going to be like Voldemort. I mean, that is a sign of PTSD, you know. Not the only one,
He's got a
certainly.
lot of nightmares.
He has nightmares. Yeah, he has nightmares. He has what else?
Pain.
Huh?
He has pain in his scar.
Yeah.
He starts
Behind
withdrawing
the
from
Tootsie
his
Rolls.
friends.
You what?
He starts withdrawing from his friends.
He does. He withdraws from his friends. Do you think that's a learned trait too? Kind of a protection, a way of protection? I do too. I think that a lot of us, when we've been hurt, tend to do that. When things start to get really hard and really confusing and really traumatic, then I think we have a tendency to just kind of back away from everybody. I think that's really normal. So yeah, there are definitely some signs of PTSD. You know, we look at the part where doesn't he blow up Aunt Marge?
Yes.
He blows her up, yeah. I mean, these are these things that happen that are kind of these little bits of anger that are escaping from him, and they're justified. They're completely justified, right? Does that make sense? Yes.
I think at the same time, though, you also see him reaching out to characters that, and building relationships with a house elf and with ghosts and with Hagrid and with
Yes.
centaurs that are considered, because, you know, he himself was treated like an outcast and less than, so he's not bothered by that,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, again, his capacity for kindness and empathy and just generally liking people it's unbelievable after what he's been through. I always talk about Harry as if he's real. I don't know if you understand it. You know, I like to think he is. He's out there somewhere, right? This is happening, and we're going to get our letter any day now, okay? Does he seem relatively unscathed, though? You know, we see these little things, these little bits. Does he seem relatively unscathed by what's happened to him? He really does, doesn't he?
I mean, whenever I think back to the books or reread them, I'm always just kind of astounded at the resiliency
Yeah.
that this kid has.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that, when the second book came out, I was like, why is he back with the Dursleys? I thought he was done with them after the first one. You know,
I know. You just get this feeling of dread. It's like, no. Why do they keep sending him back, you know?
But there's a strong message there too, because he doesn't know anything else.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he's this abused kid, but that's the only home he's known.
Yeah.
And so, of course, he's going to go back.
That's where he's going to go. Where else is he going to go? He really doesn't have anywhere else to go. Where am I at? So I read a really interesting quote when I was doing a little bit of research for this. Someone had commented that Harry seems to be a curiously incurious child. So when you think about when he was getting all the letters and when they were trying to get him to Hogwarts and they had to, the Dursleys had him fleeing across the country. And then he goes to Hogwarts. They find him and he goes to Hogwarts. There is almost this strange sense of, oh, okay, well, this is happening now, rather than this absolute and complete, if that happened to me, I would be like, oh my gosh, everybody look at this, we'd be announcing in the paper. He seems curiously incurious, and I can't help but wonder do you remember what's the first rule about living with the Dursleys? Does anybody remember that?
Don't ask questions.
Don't ask questions. Don't ask questions. That is the #1 rule of living with the Dursleys. Don't ask questions. We kind of had a similar rule like that when I was very young, and with my father's family, when my parents were still married. That was kind of a rule for us. The rule was, though, that you never questioned your elders. Never question your elders. That is the biggest show of disrespect. You never question your elders. You never correct your elders. And so I grew up thinking it was never okay. Never okay. No matter how bad something got, no matter how horrible a person behaved, I didn't know until I was much, much older that it was okay to say, what are you doing? That's not okay. You know, he does not ask that many questions in the beginning. I think he gets better about that. He starts learning from this whole new world that he's in, and I think he gets a lot better with that, right? What about confidence? You were talking about that. He seems to lack a lot of confidence, doesn't he? So when we really look, there's a lot to Harry Potter that are the effects of what he's been through, but we're also a little surprised that he is as resilient as he is. Do you think? Yeah, okay. So what about others? Who else in Harry Potter? Somebody mentioned one earlier. Who else is abused?
Well, I wasn't thinking abuse, I was thinking where you mentioned Neville earlier and
Yes.
PTSD, and I think Neville probably has
Yes.
PTSD from his reaction to the spider with the Curious curse.
Yes, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit,
Sorry.
okay? And I'm going to read, because I want to read a quote. This was in The Philosopher's Stone. Okay, this is what Neville says, is talking about, to I believe Harry and Hermione and Ron. He says, my great uncle, I can't speak with an English accent, I'm really sorry, I'm terrible at it, so I'm going to have to use my plain old American one. My great uncle Algie kept trying to catch me off my guard and force some magic out of me. He pushed me off the end of Black Pier Pool once. I nearly drowned, but nothing happened until I was 8. Great Uncle Algie came around for dinner, and he was hanging me out of an upstairs window by the ankles when my great Auntie Enid offered him a meringue, and he accidentally let go. But I bounced all the way down to the garden and into the road. That's a funny part of the book. We all think of that as a really funny part of the book. But hanging a child outside of a window by his ankles, throwing him off into a pond when he can't swim, that's pretty abusive, right? So maybe, and his grandmother, by the way, is very, very rough on him. Yeah, she loves him. She obviously loves her grandson. She's very, very rough on him. Puts a lot of pressure on him. She is one of the people who kind of gives him this constant idea that he's less than, that he's incompetent, that he can't get anything right. Yeah. Some of our other favorite characters in the book do that too. Who else? Professor McGonagall. She always says things like that. Just for once, can you pretend that you can do something right? These are the messages that Neville is getting all the time. So it's absolutely no surprise that he does feel that complete lack of confidence in everything that he does. Does that make sense? Yeah. Anybody have a different view than that? Is that surprising? Has anybody else thought of that before? Yeah. First time I read the book, I laughed, thinking about this kid bouncing all the way down the driveway. And the second time I read it, I went, whoa, wait, what? That's not okay. You know, we don't hang children outside by their ankles. We don't push them. It may have something to do with, by the way I learned to swim. My biological father, when I was 4, took me and threw me in the ocean, and said, sink or swim. And I actually did. I did that doggy paddle just as fiercely as I could. I'm sure somebody would have come in and got me if I hadn't learned to swim, I hope. My mom was there. She definitely would have, yeah. But yeah, so that really, when I read that for the second time, I went, whoa, that's not okay. This is something that we would consider abusive, right? Who else? Yes?
I always thought about, I didn't really like the way Harry's father and his friends treated Severus Snape.
Severus Snape, yeah.
I thought he was kind of bullied by them.
He really was, yeah.
You know, he could dish it out a little bit himself. He wasn't, you know, he was kind of a hard guy to get to know or like, but he did get, I didn't like the way he treated him.
Did any of us know that we would end up loving Severus Snape by the end of the book? By the end of the last one? No. Nobody did, and yet I think a lot of us have one. So let's talk about Snape, because there is a whole lot going on there. Does anybody know the history? What was Snape's life like?
It was
Growing up.
He was a closed off person.
He was what?
He was a closed off person, similar to how I think Harry was a bit sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
With others.
So why do you think he was that way? What happened? Does anybody know about his childhood? He was horribly, horribly neglected by his family. Horribly neglected. He lived in a very poor district. His clothes, I believe the quote was, in describing him, his clothes were always mismatched and ill-fitting, as if someone had just thrown together a patchwork, something like that. These are the things that people talk about when he was young. He would, and this is from, I think this is from Fantastic Beasts, but I can't remember that for sure. So his father was Tobias, right? He would shout at his mother while Severus cried, curled up and cried, and his mother Eileen cowered in a corner. So we're talking about a young man. There was domestic violence in his household. The house was constantly fraught with tension and anger. He was neglected, largely neglected. I've seen quotes where people kind of got the impression that his mom wanted to be the good mother. She was glad when he went to Hogwarts to get him out of that house. But she was still very, very closed off and maybe unable to parent because of what was happening to her, right? Does anybody remember all this? It definitely gives you a whole new understanding, because on the one hand, he was a bully. Severus Snape was a bully. He used his power at that school to put some kids through some terrible stuff. And maybe a part of that was because he had to, because he was playing the part of the bad guy for Professor Dumbledore. But maybe a lot of that was holdover too. Maybe there really was a lot of anger in him for the childhood he had, and then James and his friends bullying him, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So you end up kind of feeling bad for him. So who else? Yes?
Sirius Black.
Yes, thank you.
His family, his mother especially, didn't like him, didn't think he was part of their tree, and
Right.
if I remember correctly, he ran away, and whenever he did, as soon as he did, his mother went to the family tree room and burned his
Yes.
picture on it.
Scorched his name right off the family tree. He's not on there anymore. Yeah. He had a horrible childhood. As soon as it was figured out that he didn't believe what his parents believed, they disowned him. They abandoned him. They hated him. They wanted terrible things to happen to him. And so, yeah, he is definitely someone who was abused. These abuse things wind all the way through these books. And knowing J.K. Rowling now the way we do, she's got into this, right? These are her passions. Social justice is a big passion of hers. And so reading them with that lens, reading this book with that lens, you can kind of see where she's going with all this. There's intention here. There's a reason she's bringing it up. So who else? Somebody had mentioned it earlier.
Oh, Malfoy.
Yes, Malfoy. Let's talk about the Malfoys. Whew! That is a scary family, right? So what's going on there? What's going on with the Malfoys?
They're afraid to cross Lucius. His wife is. In the last book, his mom kind of, I forget what it was exactly that happened, but basically just wanted to save Draco from Lucius.
Yeah. It definitely always struck me as a family where domestic violence is happening, because Lucius Malfoy has absolute iron control over his wife and his son. They do what he wants, when he wants. They act the way he wants, when he wants, and it's a really scary thing. And you can see sometimes, when you're reading through this stuff, how maybe Draco doesn't want to be doing the stuff that they're telling him to do. But his father's never going to accept anything less.
He was scared, and he didn't want to. They were trying to force him to kill Dumbledore, and he didn't want to do it.
Yeah. gosh. I'm not sure. Hi. I'm not sure I have ever seen a worse villain than Dolores Umbridge. I mean,
Because she set up all those rules.
and the
not
very
use their full
sweet.
abilities.
You know, she's not who we expect to be. She looks like her grandmother, right?
It
You
just
know?
scares me. Her office kind of scared me.
I'm with you. I'm not much of a pig person.
That kind
I
of
like
scared
your-
me. Like
that's nice.
there's all the cats are on the walls. Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it okay? She has one. Here's Pumpkin. Oh, okay. Well, there you got some. That's it. High five me. In life, you go for what you want. Thank you. First step. So there's one more. There's one more big one that we haven't talked about.
Hagrid?
Huh?
Hagrid?
Oh, Hagrid. I love Hagrid. It's not who I meant, but we can talk about Hagrid. I don't know much about his background.
Let's see.
He was
I-
half giant.
Oh, yeah. So he faced a lot of discrimination. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Human father and giant.
And giant mother.
His mother abandoned him, right?
Yeah, and then his father.
Oh, yeah.
And he was kicked out of Hogwarts because he was framed for the initial.
Yes. Yes, and his mother, yeah, she did abandon him. She didn't want anything to do with him.
Framed
Yeah.
by Voldemort himself, actually. Hagrid was.
Yeah. That's a good one. And he sure turned out to be a sweetheart, didn't he? That was a huge one. Who else? Who's the big one? Voldemort.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, what do we
You
know
gotta-
about his life?
He was I remember the backstory. He was abused by his parents. They didn't like him at all.
It's not that he was abused by his parents. Now, his mother had more,
Died
Moreau?
giving birth to him.
huh?
Voldemort, mom
Yes.
died giving birth to him.
Yes, Moreau, sorry, Moreau.
I believe-
She was horribly abused by both her father and her brother. She ended up giving a love potion to not Tom Riddle.
It was Tom Riddle, Senior.
Tom Riddle Sr., thank you, Tom Riddle Sr., which, by the way, can we just talk for a minute? What's today's analogy of a love potion? Roofie! These are date rape drugs! How scary is that? Right?
Secondary one.
Yes, yes.
Considering Harry almost got roofied.
Yes, yeah.
Wrong about
It's a
it.
scary thing. So she gave him a love potion, ran away with him, eloped, and then when she found out she was pregnant, she thought, this girl, and we can have some sympathy for her. She has been abused her entire life. She's been ostracized. I mean, they are the people nobody wants anything to do with. They're the gross people, the dirty people, the poor people in this town, whereas this Tom Riddle is just, everybody's hero in there, right? And so this is what she's gone through. And then finally, he looks twice at her. They go away. She finds out she's pregnant, and she stops giving him the love potion, thinking he's really fallen in love with me. He really means this, and he leaves her. Don't get me wrong. I don't blame him, but we can still have some sympathy for her, for everything that she's been through, right? And so she goes to the orphanage. She just makes it there in time, and she dies in childbirth. And then Tom Riddle Jr. or Voldemort ends up growing up in this orphanage with no idea of what it means to be loved or taken care of or valued, right?
And Dumbledore was the one that found him.
Dumbledore was the one who found
And
him.
Dumbledore, I think he tried to be more of a father figure
Mhm. Yep.
as he was growing.
So anything else with Voldemort besides he's bad, we don't like him? No. Everybody in my life since Harry Potter, anybody that which I very, very, very rarely dislike people, but when I do, they're always, he who won't be named, or she who won't be named. That is the ultimate bad guy in my life, right? Does anybody else use that? Nope, I'm just a nerd. Okay then. You what?
That's what I'm going to.
I think the ultimate bad guy is Dolores Umbridge.
Yes, she is definitely, my
She was
gosh.
worse than Voldemort.
Was that hard for people to read? Because that whole book was really hard for me to read because of her. And just thinking, and I realized because of my job that I often see things in a way
She
that
tortured.
maybe not everybody does, but these are things that happen. They're really happening to kids at the hands of people who are supposed to protect them and take care of them. Yes, there are abusive teachers. There are definitely abusive parents. There are orphanages that are not great, so.
Worse than the biggest thing, she did child abuse to all the kids that were in Hogwarts by
She really did.
making them write lines with a jinxed pen that when they write, it'd spread on the skin.
Over and over again. And we never really find out what is in her past, right? To make her that way. So maybe there isn't anything that made her that way. Perhaps she just
That's what makes her
chose.
so creepy, is
Yes.
like, is she just
She just chose. Yeah, she chose to be bad. That's all there is to it. She chose that.
She's the ultimate rule follower.
Yes. Yes.
She believes only in structure and order and authoritarianism.
Oh gosh, yeah. Whew. Again, we could do a whole other speech on that, right? We should do that. We should just go hang out after this and talk about that. So one of the things that I loved about this is that if we look at all these people we've talked about, we look at Harry Potter, we look at Draco, we look at Severus Snape, we look at Voldemort, we look at Sirius Black, Neville Longbottom. All of these people, guys, by the way, all of them guys, all grew up with varying amounts of trauma. All grew up with varying amounts of child abuse, right? But look how different they are. Look how different they all respond to that. You got Harry, who's this wonderfully empathetic, resilient young man who grows up to want to save the world. You know, you've got Neville Longbottom, who is just a mess. I mean, he's a hot mess. Poor Neville. He is just, oh my gosh. Then you've got Severus Snape, who grows up to be a bully himself. You've got Voldemort, who grows up to be just a horrible, horrible person. You've got Draco, who does these horrible things, but really doesn't seem like he wants to all the time. They're all handling this in very, very different ways.
I think I remember them talking about Dumbledore's past. Would he ever be considered that?
I don't know.
Or not?
I don't know. Does anybody know, remember anything about Dumbledore's past that was at all abusive? I don't remember anything, but I'm gonna have to go look that up now.
I can't remember if he was. I know I can't remember.
He was best friends with Grindelwald.
With Grindelwald, yeah.
Yeah.
He's definitely been betrayed.
And the only reason
More
they
than
split
once.
with him was the fight that caused Ariana's death.
My mom get a sucker.
Yes, your mom absolutely. Is that what we need to give mom? Mom needs a sucker? There you go. Sorry, I ate all the green ones. That's my favorite. They all come, oh yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, do you think that they're all displaying how different children can grow up
Yes.
to be adults and react to child abuse?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because this is true. Children who are abused grow up with a variety of different issues. Some of them don't seem to be affected all that much. Many of them have very serious issues, PTSD, those kinds of things, but they all handle it differently. There's no cookie cutter approach. And I think sometimes when we're viewing media, when we're reading, when we're on Facebook, we have this idea of this is how an abused child is going to act. And this is what I should pay attention to. And that's not necessarily always the truth, right? It's not necessarily always the truth. There are some things that we need to pay attention to, and we're going to talk about those in a minute. But I found a couple of stats while I was preparing for this that really stuck out. It just kind of made my blood run cold. The U.S. has one of the worst records among industrialized nations. We lose about 4 children a day to child abuse and neglect. Did anybody else know that?
Yes, me.
You did? Well, I'm going to give you some more candy then. Oh, here's a green one. How about that? There you go. Thank you. You are so smart. What's your name?
Freya.
Freya. Even a cool name. 4 children a day are dying in the United States because of child abuse. Did anybody else know that? Because I did not know that. That is outrageous. The worst record among industrialized nations. That is really, really something.
Yes, I did.
In 2015, nearly 700,000 children were abused, and almost 1,670 died. That's terrifying to me. What are some of the effects that we might see outside of Harry Potter? And what about real children? Not that Harry's not real, I'm not saying that. What are some of the effects that we might see for a child who's been abused? Did you have your hand up?
I was gonna say, they,
Mom, me,
like
me.
Sarah earlier, they end up being, they're really closed off from people. They
Yeah.
won't let anybody in.
Yeah. Definitely a distrust of people.
Runaway, suicide, depression.
Suicide, depression, yeah. You hit a bunch of the big ones. What else?
Learning disabilities,
Yes.
inability to learn, inability to socialize
Yes.
appropriately.
Do you know, when I first started at Hope, which was 18 years ago, one of the very first conferences I went to was on working with children. And the keynote speaker, the very first thing she did was she handed out 2 pieces of paper. And she said, I want you to put these 2 quizzes on right in front of you, and I want you to look at them. And we looked at them, and they were exactly the same. There was nothing different. It was the same sheet of paper, twice. And she said, one is a test for ADHD. The other is what I would use to find out if a child is growing up in a home where there's domestic violence. The symptoms mirror each other. The symptoms of ADHD mirror a child who's growing up around violence. That's really scary. I'm not, by the way, saying at all that children do not, that ADHD doesn't exist. It's absolutely a thing. It's a very serious thing, and some children have to be medicated. It definitely has to be addressed. But sometimes what we're seeing is children who have been traumatized, and they have the same effects as a child who has ADHD. Does that make sense? So yeah, definitely. What else? What are some other things?
Keep repeating the abuse, like continuing the cycle, the learned behavior.
That could be. That definitely could be. Although I'm always really careful about saying that because I'm always afraid someone's going to be in a room who's been abused, and they're going to hear that, and they're going to think, oh my God, I'm an abuser. And here's the reason why. So I was a victim of child sexual abuse, and I was also a very young mother. There's a correlation there, by the way, that we're going to talk about here in a minute. And I remember reading about this big study that came out that said that children who are sexually abused are much more likely to be pedophiles themselves. They're much more likely to sexually abuse children. And I thought, oh, I got to give my baby up and move somewhere where I'm never around children again. I was devastated. I was terrified. Luckily, I knew wonderful people like Bonnie Buckley, who was the executive director of SACUS for many years, if she doesn't mind me saying, we love you. And I remember talking to Bonnie about this, and Bonnie said, whoa, wait a minute. This is a study that was only done on men who had sexually abused children, had been convicted, and were in prison. That's a pretty small group of people to do that kind of study with, right? Okay. So we want to always be careful how we present that, but the fact of the matter is, if you're not taught parenting skills, if you're not taught how to care for others, if you're not taught empathy, then that's not something that you may learn, right? So yeah. Did all that make sense? Thank you. What else? What are some other big things? Bonnie?
They have they may have low self-esteem, and so they end up in abusive relationships because they don't think they deserve anything better than that, or they don't even know there's anything better than that.
That's right. Absolutely right. Fortunately, I'm generally a walking statistic. There was a lot of domestic violence in my home life. I married someone who was violent. This is something that we learn. I used to, and I still tell people, I was probably 12 or 13 years old before I started going and spending the night with friends, having sleepovers. And I was absolutely shocked to find out that not all dads hit their wives. That's the moment I found out that my family was abnormal. There was something different about us. And I did not know that before. I didn't like it, don't get me wrong. I didn't like being scared all the time. I didn't like being sad. I didn't like the big scary noises. But I thought it was normal. This is what everybody does. This is how it is. So definitely, yeah. What else? These are really good. Yes, Danielle?
Anxiety disorders and eating disorders.
Eating disorders could be a big thing. Ready? Throw it. Woo! I'm going to claim that as your bad catch and not my bad throw. Teenage pregnancy is definitely something, especially when you're talking about sexual abuse, because unfortunately for some of us, not all, but for some of us who are sexually abused, promiscuity becomes an issue because we learn very early that that's the way you get love. That's a very sad thing. What else?
We'll drop out.
High school dropout, yeah. Many high-risk behaviors. There are a whole lot of high-risk behaviors. And one of the things that research has shown in the last 10 or 15 years is that chronic illnesses later in life are actually associated with child abuse. Has anybody ever heard of the ACEs study? It's the, gosh, Bonnie, do you remember the name of the ACEs study? It's the, do you?
I just heard about something called adverse childhood experience.
That's it, adverse childhood experiences. Thank you so much for remembering that for me. I always just call it ACE, so I forget what it really is. Adverse childhood experience. If you go online and look that up, there's actually this little test that you can take, and it gives you your ACE score. It's really, really fascinating and heartbreaking when you're thinking about this kind of stuff. But child abuse affects us not just as a child, but far into life, physically and emotionally both. Both of those.
In the story I heard about this, ICDVP, one of the sort of, thank you, sort of positive notes about it was that although all these adulthood maladies and problems occurred with people who had ACE, the one thing that made it the cure, there is a cure, and it is basically having one person who loved you and could care for you.
Thank
Having
you.
adults in your life who would care for you.
Because that is where we're going next. Thank you so much for bringing, you're like my segue. You need to come to all my presentations, you know? Because you have brought me into everything I wanted to talk about today. That's awesome. By the way, I do want to mention too that women who are victims of physical assault as a child are twice as likely to be victims of physical assaults as adults. Did you know that statistic? That's one that I didn't know. That was a new one for me. And I generally know the statistics about women in victimization. So, did you have a question, Joe? Joe? No? Okay. Sorry, I'm not wearing my glasses, and so sometimes I just, if you move your arm, I think your hand's up. So what can we do? What helps? What you said first and foremost. Those positive role models, people who show you a different way of life, people who show you that you have value. Though that is so incredibly important. So I had a lot of very traumatic experiences in my childhood, but I also had people who loved me and took care of me and showed me love and showed me a different way of life. I also had, again, the extreme good fortune of meeting Bonnie, Althea Pendergast. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she's the executive director of our agency, and Debbie Whitworth, who used to be at our agency. There were these, I call them the trio, the three, positive female role models who really showed me that healing can happen, that you can move beyond it. That was so incredibly important. So you're right, having that person there, I think is one of the most important things, right? What else? What else can we do as far as child abuse goes? It's a hard one, right? There's no easy answer. Danielle?
Active listening.
Huh?
Active listening.
Active listening. Danielle is one of our interns. She's undergoing our 40-hour training. And active listening is something that we talk about a whole lot. Ready? Thank you. Remember, it happens in good families. We think about it only happening in those families. Well, the Malfoys were a pretty good family, weren't they? According to that society. This happens in all families. Good families, the families we see as bad families, the families that are quiet, that you would never expect it from, the families that you absolutely do expect it from. This can happen to anyone, right?
Just another example, the Blacks and
Yes.
and Malfoys were both sort of aristocrats
Yeah.
in this wizarding world, and the Weasleys were sort of this, somewhat ne'er-do-well family, a bunch of kids, all redheads. Their house was kind of rickety and didn't have any clothes, but they were pretty healthy.
Yep, and they struggled, and you're absolutely right. The others were they're kind of royalty.
Person.
Percy, oh, you're right. I always forget about Percy. I literally, somebody was,
Well, he was the middle child, right?
he was, he was the middle child, and so we do forget about him. And he does kind of almost disappear, there for a long time. We don't hear much about him for quite a while.
He's
So,
very into rules and authority.
yep, yes, very, yeah, he's kind of
That
a,
sends him to the dark place.
Yeah. yeah, big time. Let's hope that he's not a Dolores Umbridge, right? What else? What can we do? What do we do if we see child abuse? We think we see it.
Report it.
Report it, absolutely. Report it, report it, report it. Even if you just think about it. Oh yeah, you got a green one. Even if you just think that it's there, better be safe than sorry. Honestly, better to be safe than sorry. You've got to know. You can't go to sleep at night knowing that you may have left a child out there with no protection. There's another part to this though that is really hard to talk about. So you definitely want to report. You want to be there for a child, of course, if you can. You want to be that person that Steve was talking about. But you don't want to make promises to a child, because the fact of the matter is you may not be able to stop the abuse. There may be absolutely nothing you can do. You may report it. Child welfare may come and investigate it. And they may decide, nope, there's nothing wrong going on here, or we can't find any evidence of anything going on here. And so they walk away and leave the child in the same position. What you can promise is, I'll be there as long as I'm able to. I will always care about you. That will never ever change. Even if I'm not around, that will never change. I will always care about you. Okay? And I'll be here if you call. If you call. Because here's the thing, I don't tell kids at my job, I'm always going to be here for you. Right, Joe? We can't tell our kids that. Because for all we know, the parent's going to take the child so we can't see them anymore. The child may move away. You can't make those kinds of promises. You can't make a promise to a child that you're going to stop the abuse. You may not be able to stop it. That's heartbreaking and awful, but it is true. You got to try, but it is true. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. What else? Counseling. Children who receive that intervention very young definitely do a better job. I often wonder, not that I'm blaming anyone in my family, because, well, I'm blaming the abusive people in my family, but I'm certainly not blaming my mother, the people who loved me. But I often do wonder how my life might have been different if someone had put me in counseling right after the first incidents of abuse. Right after that happened. How would my life have been different now? Right? And my last thing is talk about it. This is great. This is why this is important. This is what I said earlier. I feel like such a nerd because I'm so excited about this presentation. People shouldn't enjoy talking about abuse. That's a weird thing, but I do. And I do because the more we talk about it, the more it sheds light on it, the harder it is for it to happen. Okay? So talk about it. Talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. Talk about it until people roll their eyes at you because they don't want to hear it anymore. They need to hear it that much, right? Donate. Donate to child welfare organizations. Donate to organizations that assist kids. There are a million out there. Big Brothers, Big Sisters, us, SACUS. There are a million out there that help organizations. And I don't mean donate money, although that's always great, of course. Donate time. Donate articles that they need. Donate whatever it is. Whatever you have is valuable, and people can use it. And volunteer. Volunteer. Get out there and do something to change. Yeah. Yes?
You said report it. How do we report it? What's the
Ooh,
best
good
way?
one. The Illinois DCFS hotline, which is the Department of Children and Family Services, is 125 abuse, right? 1-800-25-ABUSE. Sorry. 1-800-25-ABUSE is the number.
Bless you.
So anyone can report that. Anyone. You don't have to be a mandated reporter. Those of us who work in social services, education, anything like that, we're all mandated reporters, meaning we are required by law to report child abuse. But even if you're not mandated, you can do it. You can do it anonymously too. You don't have to report your name. It's better if you're willing to report your name, because then if they have questions or honestly need testimony, then at least they have someone. There's a better chance of getting help for that child if you have names, people who are willing to come in, right? But you can be anonymous.
And domestic abuse also report that, or is it better to try to talk to the future survivor?
So, that is such a good question.
Really good
So it kind of depends, okay? If you see domestic violence happening, you know, you're sitting in your home. This actually just happened to me not long ago. You're sitting in your home and you hear a lot of loud crashes coming from next door. You hear a lot of shouting. You hear maybe some screaming. Call the police. Call the police right away. So if you see it, hear it happening, yes, right then you want to call the police, okay? But let's say you have a good friend who meets you for coffee and she has a black eye and she says, oh, you know, I ran into the door, it's no big deal. But you've been noticing some other things like she's not meeting you as often. She seems to look to her partner every time someone asks her a question. Before she answers, she looks to her partner. She's maybe withdrawn. She's dressing differently. She's acting very differently. You notice these things. That's not something that you're going to want to call the police, okay? You want to talk to them. You want to talk to the survivor, yes. You want to talk to them about services that are available. There are actually some key things to say to a victim of domestic violence. I believe you. It is not your fault. It's only going to get worse. I'm here for you if you leave, okay? Those are really important things to say. Does that make sense? Yeah. And did that answer your question? Yay! See, I'm all on familiar ground here. I can talk about domestic violence for 6 hours. This is my stuff. What else? What other questions? I still have a lot of candy. Yes?
How can you identify, well, I guess what are the identifiers of a child that may be abused?
Well, you certainly want to look for the telltale signs, bruises, unexplained injury, stuff like that. But then also you want to look at things a child says. Think maybe a child knows some things of a sexual nature that they really are at an age where they shouldn't know those things. Maybe they're extremely withdrawn. Maybe they regress in age suddenly. You know, you're a teacher and your 9-year-old student suddenly starts wetting their pants during the day. Could be a physical thing. It could certainly be, you know, abuse. You want to look for things that are out of the ordinary, right? Anything else that any of our children people would add?
Well, it's not just physical, you might see a lot of the same symptoms from verbal.
From an emotional abuse, yeah. And here's the saddest thing I'm going to tell you all day. Emotional abuse, generally speaking, is not illegal. It is not illegal. I could call DCFS and the police all day long for a parent calling their child names and constantly degrading them and telling them. Truth is, Harry Potter in this book, by the way, this is how old and battered my own copy is. In this book, there is very little in here that I can think of that we would be able to call DCFS on. Maybe the Neville Longbottom stuff. You know, you can't hang a child out the window by their ankles. You can't do that. Maybe if Petunia had swung that frying pan and hit Harry. Beyond that, there's really not much in here that child welfare authorities would do anything about. How scary is that, right? So definitely. Emotional abuse, though, physical abuse obviously is traumatizing. I'm not downplaying it, but I hear victims of domestic violence say all the time, and I said it myself, sometimes I wish you'd just hit me instead. Not because we want to be hit, but because that emotional abuse, that verbal abuse is so damaging. It literally changes who you are. It changes who you are. It's just devastating. And yet, there's really not much that people would do. Can't get an order of protection, generally speaking, based on emotional abuse. Really can't have somebody arrested based on emotional abuse. What a scary thing, right? What else? Did I miss anything?
Yes.
What did I miss, Pumpkin? Those are some pretty cool shoes. We're besties now. What else? Any other questions? Any other comments? This has been the funnest thing ever, and I love this intimate setting too. Thank you all so much for coming. Again, Angie Hunt with Hope. If anybody has any further questions, please feel free to get in contact with us. Joe over here is one of our children's advocates. We got Kai back there, who is our case manager for our transitional housing. And then Danielle is our intern. We had Dee here earlier, who's also a children's advocate. So it was pretty exciting and nerve-wracking to have so many Hope staff around here to hear this. So thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Angie. And on the subject of merging things that we all love, if you would like to help donate money to Hope and also play Harry Potter trivia on October 26th, we're going to be having a trivia fundraiser here in the library for Hope. We have schedule cards. We had some, currently they're all gone. They are at most entrances. It's going to be, what's the start time on that, 7?
I'm not sure, it's in the evening, right?
It says 6 to 10 on this.
6 to 10, okay. So starting at 6, there is a registration fee for individuals and teams both, but it is going to Hope, so we hope that you can put a team together and come and share your love of all things Harry Potter and help out Hope. So.
We appreciate
Oh,
it.
yes, thank you. The Harry Potter Alliance from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign is going to be running the trivia competition. They've been doing Harry Potter trivia for years. They are cooking up special questions just for this event. I met 2 of their members back in September for a promo on WCIA, and they are some fanatical Harry Potter fans. So I think we're going to have a really good event. They've got it down to a science on how to run these. So, you know, grab some friends, grab some random strangers that like Harry Potter.
How much would it be for individual?
I think it's, what was it? It's on our website.
Can you enter, do you need to enter a team or do you need to, can you enter individually?
I think the minimum team size is 2. So if you can find one other person, you can be a team
So I
of
think it's
2.
I'm maybe remembering this wrong, but it might be $10 per team, $5 per person.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think the maximum team size was 5. So, yeah, there's the per person registration and then the per team registration. And again, all proceeds go.
And there'll be prizes.
Yeah, there will be
Teams.
prizes. There's also a costume contest going on at the same time, so the trivia is in costume if you so choose.
And there's some events going on at the Tarbell the same night, we're sort of
Yeah.
sharing with them, so there's sort of a,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on, a dance party and food.
Yeah, they've got a DJ and food, and the EIU game club is going to be running some Harry Potter themed games, so it should be an exciting evening all around. So I hope you can join us.
Thank you. We appreciate so much that you do that for us. That's very, very sweet.
It was actually the Harry Potter Alliance was the people that came up with the idea because all of their events they try to make some sort of a fundraiser for a social justice cause, because that's the whole point of the Harry Potter Alliance is they're trying to take the message of the books to go out and do good in the world and do it. So
That's amazing.
yeah, that was their request was they would run the trivia, but it had to go to a good cause.
It's October 19th. Yeah. Purple. Yeah, and October 19th, by the way, because this is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That's why I got my big purple streak in. This is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. October 19th, which is this Thursday, is Wear Purple Day. So wear your purple. Send us pictures on Facebook or my Facebook if you're on there. Send us pictures in your purple. I can't be here the 26th, unfortunately, we have people that are coming, but our annual candlelight vigil for domestic violence victims is that night. But I wish I could come because that sounds like so much fun. And believe me, we'd have a team already right now. We'd have a team if we could be there. So thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. This is so great. This is going on my wall for sure.